Hey, hello there. This is Laren with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. Music is brought to us by Syrinscape. This is one of the tracks from the soundtrack for the Cyberpunk rule set. So if you haven't checked that out for Fantasy Grounds yet, it's pretty slick. This is the interface. Looks really nice, polished, professional. I mean, it's a beautiful rule set. I have to say, even if you don't play it, just looking at it, it's really nice. It's got a lot of potential. I think it's one of the better done rule sets out there. I think Fallout's done really well, and the Star Trek rule set's done well. These are, on top of D&D and Pathfinder, so it's nice to have some variety, and it also makes for a good, a good way to kind of celebrate what's going on with the changes at Fantasy Grounds. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. In case you've been under a rock for a while, or you're just returning to Fantasy Grounds, or maybe you're brand new, depending on what your case may be. So we're going to jump right into this. So this is what I'm showing right now is the Cyberpunk Red rule set. It has some content to it, so it's not bad. I mean, it has quite a bit of content, actually. If you have subscribed to Fantasy Grounds or you are a current user and you already have an account, if you want to try something new that's like science fiction or related to, not fantasy related or something, I think Cyberpunk's a good crossover to start something different. There is the Alien rule set. You can do Starfinder. But if you really want something refreshing, I think doing like Fallout or Cyberpunk is probably the way to go. Let's see, what do we got here? So under modules, if I open this up, you can see there's a ton of stuff out for this already, which is amazing. I really think the guys did a great job on this, and just having this available as something different and new is exciting. But nonetheless, I'm going to go to the web browser here. One of the things that I had hoped to mention during this stream was that we have our Founders Day Weekend 6 coming up. This is our 6th anniversary for the founding of our community. It's scheduled for July 28th to the 30th. We're scheduling all the events through Warhorn. That way we can keep track of them, and also it makes signups and tracking what the events are and that sort of thing a lot easier. We tried through the Discord, and it kind of works, but it doesn't have a very good way to sign up for things, keep track of things. So our friend Greg is taking this over. He's doing the scheduling. So if you are on the fence about listing an event or something, actually just contact myself or Greg in Discord, and we will basically help you get signed up for an event. So if you want to present something that's related to Cyberpunk, or if you want to run a game or whatever it may be, get a hold of us, and the links will be in the description of the video. But basically, we have a Google form that we've set up that you just have to fill out the basic information. It's nothing crazy. And then Greg will list it for you on the website, so you don't have to do anything. Just have an account for Warhorn if you haven't already signed up for it. And that way, if you want to join other games and kind of use that as a tool for the future, that would help you too. So yes, everything is on Warhorn, but essentially the Founders Day weekend, we're going to have some guests. Let's see, we got some Suede games. We've got a Cyberpunk game. We've got a couple D&D games. We have a presentation from Florian. He's going to do a show about his favorite AI program and how to generate images from that. We have some guests that are coming that are going to talk about Arkenforge, so they'll be on, and then we're trying to get Smiteworks to join us on some of those days. I'm going to see if I can get on the Saturday show with Josh and talk about the map tools. And it looks like we got some Cyberpunk here. What else do we got? Numenera. So it isn't all just D&D. There's other things on here. Hopefully we'll get more events before it starts. It's in about a month from now, from the day of this broadcast, so it's exactly 30 days from now. So hopefully we'll get some more events up, and then we'll also open up signups on the 9th. So the cutoff for this is in about a week, and then the attendee signups will open up on the 9th. So if you're wanting to get involved with that, make an account on warhorn.net, and you can sign up through those events there. The talks or the symposiums are going to be kind of open. You don't really have to sign up for those, but we're going to hold those in our Fantasy Grounds Academy Discord. Like I said, all the links will be in there. So essentially, we're really just trying to do some community building. We want to get people kind of to talk to each other. We like to have the community, streamers, game masters, developers, content creators, all get everyone together, share their knowledge and their content, and also to get people exposed to playing online with the Fantasy Grounds Unity platform. So that's really what our main goal is. Tertiary goal is just to kind of recognize our community effort and to just kind of signify another year going by, that sort of thing. So it's not really all about myself or the founders. It's more about the community. Initially, when we did our first one, it kind of was like that, but this is more evolved now. This is a lot more, it's larger than myself or anyone else involved. It's kind of a big community. We're getting close to 10 grand, so maybe that will hit that mark this year. We'll see. So basically, this is our website, the Fantasy Grounds Academy. If you haven't subscribed or gone to there, you don't even have to subscribe, but I put on some blog posts that is kind of relevant to what's happening in the community, like the integration for the Syrinscape audio. That's kind of what I had playing in the background earlier. So there's some topics related to that. We were going to discuss these, so we might as well start with this. So just so you know that if you haven't tested it out already, Fantasy Grounds has integrated with Syrinscape to kind of make it easier for newer users to get set up with the Syrinscape player through Fantasy Grounds. So Fantasy Grounds will trigger the sounds. It doesn't have any of the audio in it or anything like that. It's basically a chat URL trigger that triggers the website. So you'll have to have a Super Siren subscription. And once you have that set up and you implement it into Fantasy Grounds, it makes it easier to kind of set it up through Syrinscape. We got to remember that most of this integration was kind of worked and centered around that idea. Although they did provide a way that we can do local audio, but that's not as straightforward and it's a little bit more challenging to set up. I have to say that it's not exactly what people think when they first start doing it. It's more or less something you can do if you don't want to pay for the subscription, and or you have a bunch of content already that you want to share with your players. So that process is a little bit more difficult because you still have to pipe the audio to your players. You have to set up all your links yourself. So there's a little bit of work involved if you're going to do your own. But if you're going to use Syrinscape and you haven't already subscribed and you don't already have a solution for audio, it's a way to go. It's really nice. I think the subscription fee is around $10 a month. They charge you every 2 months, so it's like $22 a month or something like that. But it's worth it. I think it has some merit to it. Some people don't want to pay for another subscription, but you know, if you want to bring audio and you want the convenience and you don't want a bunch of hassles, it is certainly a really smooth way to do it. People that are already using Syrinscape already have their own solution. This probably won't really appeal to them too much unless they want to start a new campaign and kind of start all over or something like that. But in regards to, you know, somebody new to Fantasy Grounds or someone that was kind of hesitant about incorporating audio into their games, definitely the way to go. I like the Syrinscape and the Fantasy Grounds integration. I think it's pretty cool. But I think initially there was a lot of confusion. Like some people thought that the audio comes with the packs that you get on the store, and those packs are actually sound links. They're not the actual sounds. So that's something that you'll have to kind of navigate yourself. But I just wanted to let you know that it's out and it's ready to go. It just needs a few tweaks. Like right now they're working on some things for this particular implementation. they're going to keep working on little bugs and stuff as time goes on. So this is just the initial release. So if it isn't perfect now, give it a couple months, and it should be ironed out by then, I hope. The next thing is the WebM and the WebP support. There's that. So there is some differences in those, and there are some limitations. So you can enjoy using animated maps and tokens, but you have to understand there's a couple limitations there. For one, Fantasy Grounds uses VP8, which is an older codec for the video part for animation. Basically, it's compressed and it's optimized for like web streaming and that sort of thing. But there are some differences between both formats. So VP9 is more newer, but it is not the standard yet. I mean, it's becoming the standard, but it is not quite the standard for the industry. As a matter of fact, Unity itself, the platform, the actual, Unity engine, didn't incorporate version 9 until like really recently. They were sticking with VP8 because it was more universal and it had a lot more support for it. But now everything's kind of migrating over to VP9. So some of the things that you'll notice though is if you try to download and look at some of these files in Fantasy Grounds, they may not show up if they were created with VP9. So what's happening is the community is trying to update those into VP8 format, which there's not a problem with it. It's just that you got to know the right tools and have the software for it. But not everything converts one for one. There are some files that just don't work. They don't convert properly, or the aspect ratio is off. So when you try to convert it, doesn't look right. So there's a little challenges there if it comes down to, if you got a patron that puts out content in virtual, in the format of VP9 instead of VP8, you're going to have to convert those over, but just remember that it's not perfect. Like, you'll find programs that will help you convert them, but they may not quite work out. One of the things that people stumbled on is the audio channel. You don't want an audio channel inside the video when you convert, so that'll throw things off. And the other thing is that not everything is perfect in regards to the size that it's going to size it as. So it may have a certain dimension when it's VP9, but when you convert it to VP8, it's going to change some of the settings around. So those, and then also, if you don't use the correct encoder and decoder, you will also potentially have a white or black background when you need a transparency. This is true of tokens that are animated. You don't want all the background, so when you're converting tokens, you got to make sure that you have the alpha channel enabled. Otherwise, you're going to get a black or a white background. So there's all kinds of little things like that that are going to give you some, some issues at first. So there's some specific support for Fantasy Grounds. So it's VP8. So remember that the WebM, WebP should be built with VP8 only. So then you're like, well, how do you know it's virtual, VP8 or VP9? So there's a couple ways. One is to pay attention to who you're downloading from. Sometimes they'll list what they do. My thing is I'm gonna assume it's VP9 because most of the artists, when they're using programs like Blender, it allows a VP9 export, whereas they may not allow a VP8 export. So if you're a content creator and you want to build stuff and you want to make a little animated file, it adds another step to your process. So I've seen where people are trying to provide high quality VP9 tokens for their patrons, and this is probably compatible with Foundry and programs like that. But for Fantasy Grounds, right now it's only VP8, and you have to convert those VP9 files back over to VP8. When you're a content creator, that adds another step. So if you're trying to provide for like Fantasy Grounds, some people are trying to convert it to VP8. I don't think it's necessary. I would really leave that on to the community, but I think it's nice that people are trying to accommodate us. But you know, it's kind of a time versus value thing. So I get it, but so remember that VP9 files are generally smaller, believe it or not, than they are for VP8. So they take a little less room. They're like maybe, I think I read it was like 15% smaller at least. The only issue is that to make up for that size and such in the fidelity, they have to put more things into it, more guts to use your hardware. So it's harder on your CPU than a VP8 file. So I don't know what happened or why Fantasy Grounds chose to use VP8, but I think it has a few ramifications, such as the Unity engine itself did not natively support VP9 files out of the gate. So when SmiteWorks was working on this, it probably started with that, and then as time evolved, it changed. So maybe the standard is going up to VP9. The other thing is, you know, like I was saying earlier, that the processing it takes for VP9 versus VP8 is different. So when you use a VP9 file, yes, it's higher quality. Yes, the storage amount or size is smaller, but it takes a little bit more processing power from your computer to run those files. So maybe there was a point where they had to decide quality versus performance again. I'm not sure exactly what the deal was, but I'm pretty certain that has factored into it. And the other thing is the ability to convert back and forth is there. It's just not as straightforward, and it may not work out as you'd hope in some cases. I've seen people reporting that they've done everything right. They've you know, they converted the files, but they still don't show up in Fantasy Grounds. So a lot of it has to do with how the original was created. So if you're one of those, just keep that in mind that it's pretty common now. Some other cool changes that really were impressive that I liked was, you know, you had a bunch of new dice that came out. So it's a pretty nice sets of dice that were available when the launch of 4.4 came out. So if you go to dice, let's see, I want to go to, yeah, so here's the dice options. And in Fantasy Grounds, you do have a plethora of dice that you can choose from. But being that this is Cyberpunk, I don't know if I would necessarily change the default dice, but definitely want to check this out. But maybe you'll find something that'll work for your table. A lot of these are kind of set up around fantasy type stuff, so I don't know if these would work. But some of these actually have like the metallic ones that probably look pretty good in Cyberpunk or Fallout. So you have the ability to recolor these, kind of make them a polished color. So I liked all the new dice that were recently put out. These are the Knots of Fate and the Annulus of Focus dice color. Those are really nice. They got a really cool appeal to them, and I really like how they roll and stuff. So did a pretty good job on those releases. So you have like an effects one, then you have a base one, then you have a couple different examples where you can recolor them, that sort of thing. So pretty cool. Let's see what else. Let's go back to the graphic here. So we have, let's see. Oh, this is the Syrinscape Cyberpunk pack that comes with. If you have a Super Science subscription, you'll have access to these, so that it gives you more options instead of just fantasy sounds. This is one of the suggested patrons that Doug had showed during the release video. This is the Dynamic Dungeons. I found a couple others, like this JB2A. This is animated spell token. So these look cool, but some people are having trouble converting them from version 9, or maybe they're not working, because it just depends on how they were created. And it looks like just within the last couple weeks, hi, when will the Foundry Virtual 11 update be expected? So it looks like they're having some compatibility issues because the platforms are updating quicker than they can change the files. Let's see, what else do I want to talk about here? Let's see. Yeah, so basically, these changes that have come up have been pretty neat, but there are some things that kind of go along with them. Like the things I described earlier, how you have to kind of convert files, set up your own thing. And so there's some work that is involved with getting these things going. But for the most part, pretty happy with most of the changes. A couple other changes that are really cool that I think are noteworthy is the fact that you can now export files from Fantasy Grounds as for your map. So that is really cool. So if you haven't noticed it already, in Fantasy Grounds you have a way that you can export images, whereas before we couldn't do that. So if you're working on a map inside of Fantasy Grounds and you want to export it, you can. So there's a likelihood that you're going to be in a position where you're going to want to export. So you can do that. When you have something up, you have a dialog down here that allows you to export the image as a file. So you have an option to do JPEG or PNG. So you can't export animated files or animated maps, but you can do JPEG, or you can also do the PNGs. So that's a static flat map, no layers or anything like that. Also, you can import files. So if you haven't really seen this in a while, you can import files into the system, but you got to use a little arrow. They move the import button down here to the bottom. So when you click this import, that's how you pull in your files. It's now on the bottom frame. And if you use this little drop down, you can see the Universal Virtual Tabletop, DD2, WebP, WebM, PNG, JPEG, and maybe Dungeon Fog, and maybe this other one is Dungeon Draft. I don't know what these formats are, but it supports all different kinds of universal module or universal virtual tabletop formats. So that way you can pull in the files. So that would be like the line of sight and that sort of thing from third-party map makers. So that's kind of a cool thing. So you can import regular images like before, WebM, WebP, and then any of those kind of universal virtual tabletop formats. So that's a really good development. So having the ability to export your creations in Fantasy Grounds adds value to the overall platform in regards to its usability. Because before you were limited to everything inside of Fantasy Grounds, now you can actually export your work. So if you're creating a really nice map in Fantasy Grounds, you can export it and use it in another game and not have to just make a map module and then have to export it as a module. So you can actually just export the image now, which is really nice. So the import button has moved on images to the bottom. And when you have an image in process and you're actually editing and creating stuff, you can actually go in there, you unlock it, you can come down to the bottom and hit export image to file. But just remember, you're not able to make WebM, WebP, or any of the animated stuff. It's just flat images. It'll combine all the layers as long as they're active. So that is something that you can do in Fantasy Grounds now that you couldn't before, which is pretty handy. So this is just the Cyberpunk platform. I really like the way they did this. I'm just kind of showing this as it's always D&D, right? So kind of wanted to have a little bit of variety. And like I said, these changes have been really good. But like I said, using local sounds takes some setup. The reference manual is really cool now. I like what they've done to it. If they're going to go with just the, the Fantasy Grounds format for the manual, the reference manual, I hope that they move that button soon. Because right now you have to go to modules and then click on a module and then go to the reference manual to get to it. So if they update this to where this button is actually on the side over here, that'll make it a little easier so we don't have to dig through the interface to get to it. I'm pretty sure they're thinking of a way to do that. And then, you can run everything out of the reference manual. And Doug had showed us earlier that you can resize this window now to pretty much wherever you want. You can get small and big. He's added the ability to copy records, so you can copy pages to other pages and edit them. And it's also, you can unlock these and restructure. And then you have this collapsible window that you can, make it larger or smaller. And then, of course, you still have the page indexing on the bottom, and then you have the search function. So it really has a better quality functionality to it than it did before. And we don't necessarily need story entries anymore, although some people want to keep those. So story entries are these older ones where they're more modular, but really there's not a whole lot of reason to have story entries with the new reference manual anymore. So I'm kind of on the fence about it. I think I like both for some reason. I don't know why I like this still. Maybe it's the ergonomic factor. I'm used to it. But I do like these modular breakouts. But the only thing is you can't display images in here. And you can't really, do much with them other than text and links. Whereas the reference manual, when you build your own, you can embed images. You can have a left or right column. You can do some really cool stuff with it. So it just kind of depends on what your needs are. But this is a really cool implementation. I hope they keep expanding on it, because it's certainly much better than it was. There was a point where you couldn't resize the window very easily, and you didn't have as much flexibility with editing and such. So it's come a long ways. So that's something they improved too, which I'm really happy about. And then there's some things that are not as visible, but if you've kind of followed the updates in the laboratory, so this would be if you go to the Fantasy Grounds website and you take a look at the forums, and you want to come down here to the laboratory. This is generally where they're discussing and setting up for something new. So if you want to know a roadmap or something, you just kind of pay attention to this. When it goes to beta release in the test channel, this is where they typically run this for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month, and then they go ahead and implement it. So if you want to know what they're working on, the laboratory is generally where you want to look. Anything in current development, we won't know that until it reaches this point, but at least you have a 2 to 4 week preview of what's coming up. And if you're a content developer, you can test things and check it out, so you're aware of the changes you might need to make. So this is something that, if you don't really get a roadmap from them, because they have to switch their priorities, and if they want to promise something, they don't make it. That's sort of why they don't publish it. But I think that's a lot of what's happened so far, and I believe that having the Syrinscape integration is a neat tool, but it may not appeal to everyone because of the setup. Because some people already have everything set up, they don't want to redo everything. And then, of course, there are people who don't want to pay for the subscription, so they kind of have to come up with their own way of routing their audio. They can still trigger it in Fantasy Grounds, but it's not as intuitive or as nice as it is for the Syrinscape users, because you have to do your own linking. There's challenges to where you can only play one sound at a time. There's just all kinds of little things like that that'll come up if you're going to do your local sounds. It's doable. It just takes a lot of setup. So anyways, I think that's all I wanted to really cover today. I just wanted to put out a little bit of content in regards to what's happening with the community, and also some commentary on the new releases for the updates for Fantasy Grounds. I like the direction they're going. I certainly think that there's room for improvement. I know they're already working on fixes and hot fixes and that sort of things for the current releases, and it looks like there's some pretty good overall acceptance is probably about 70%, if I had to put a number on it. There's 30% that are never going to be happy, or they're just not pleased with the way things went or how they were implemented, or there's people buying things and they don't quite know what they have, and then when they realize what it is, and they get kind of discouraged and they want to return the product or whatever. So my suggestion is that if you're new to Fantasy Grounds and you're going to buy something on the store, do a little bit of reading if you can, and then on the store itself, on the store page, if you want to know like what's included or what's actually in, or the requirements, you actually click on the product link, and it'll usually tell you like this needs this, or in the case of the sound packs for Syrinscape, you'll need to have a super sub. Well, it doesn't say that right on this very front page. you have to actually click on this link, and then it will say it like 3 or 4 times that you need to have the Syrinscape player to use their SoundLink pack. So it's kind of up to you how you want to handle this, but I've seen a lot of people buy these things that have no idea what it is, and then when they actually start using it, they're like, oh crap, this isn't at all what I thought it was. So just take the time, some due diligence to take a look at the content. Actually click on the content link and read the requirements ahead of time. I've seen like probably half a dozen people return the stuff already because they didn't want to pay for the Syrinscape subscription, and they didn't realize that the sounds are not actually embedded or part of the Fantasy Grounds pack. So these SoundLink packs are just links. They're not actual sounds. The sounds are not inside of this or on your computer. They're still hosted on the Syrinscape server. So this is just a way to provide context and links. So like when something comes up in your game, like you're going to fight a dragon, the actual dialogue and the shortcut buttons will pop up in Fantasy Grounds within their context menu. So a lot of people went out and bought these and thought they were going to get the sounds for it, but they don't get the sounds unless you have Syrinscape subscription or something like that. So just keep that in mind when you're doing these things, buying this stuff. Same thing with these dice packs. When these first came out, it was confusing. So what happened was the DMs bought these things and they thought that their players would have access to it. And what they found out is that it required that the players have an account and that they buy their own dice. So this is something that, it comes up occasionally. But it says, down here requires an active subscription or a one-time license. So that can be at any level. It can be a subscription, or it could be a, some sort of larger purchase like the ultimate license. So these are just little things that, kind of go unnoticed until you actually start using it. And if you're buying a map pack or an adventure that has maps and you're expecting the line of sight to be there, the little LOS symbol on the front page tells you that it already has line of sight with it. So if you're going to buy something that supposedly has maps in it, you want to look at that. I think 90% of the products out there already have line of sight. There might be some older ones that don't yet, but the LOS symbol tells you that it's got line of sight in it and that's already done. That's what. Now, the quality of how it's done is another story. That depends on who did it and what the actual content is. But as far as, the attempt, anyways, to put line of sight on there has already been done. So it just depends on what your needs are, what kinds of content you're after, and knowing your resources. So I'm just trying to point some of the resources out. I was advertising for our Founders Day weekend, which is coming up on the 28th through the 30th of July. And we were talking about some of the new releases. I had some of my own commentary and observations that I'd made over the last couple weeks. And a lot of it just comes down to the community getting used to the content and digesting it, and then also figuring out some of the little quirks and bugs that weren't noticed during the beta. So, that's basically what you get with a big release. You'll have a lot of little things that pop up that weren't, basically it wasn't foreseen. But anyways, I'm going to let you guys go. Enjoy your week. You got hump day, and looks like hopefully this coming week there will be a lot more things going on, some positive messages and some good games, and hopefully you guys can enjoy or at least appreciate some of the new integration. It might take you a bit, but it'll be there. It'll come around. So anyways, take care, boy. Bye-bye.